Hello everyone and happy Friday. Welcome to the Mylio Photos Coffee Break. My name is Angela Andrew and today we're going to be talking about practical tips to prepare your photos for stunning prints. It's going to be a fun session where we talk a little bit about photo editing and some of the things you want to look for in your images before you either print them at home or send them off to a print lab. Before we jump into today's topic, I do want to let you know about some of the other live events we have going on next week. On Tuesday and Thursday, we hold an open live Q&A. Anyone is welcome to jump into these, whether you're brand new to Mylio Photos or whether you've been with us for quite a while. The questions that people bring to these events they really span the gamut of everything from organization, family history, photography gear, photo editing, kind of you name it, anything within that realm is fair game. So please feel free to join those on Tuesday and Thursday at 11:30 a.m. Pacific. On Fridays, we hold these coffee breaks. They're always at 11:30 a.m. Pacific. And next week, we're going to be jumping back to some of the basics and just clarifying the way Mylio Photos works throughout the month of February. And we're going to kick that off with link, copy, or move, and demystifying the Mylio Photos import options. Because these are questions we get over and over, even from people who've been using Mylio for a long time. Which options should I use? Which options are best for each scenario? We'll be covering that next week. And then transitioning into talking about syncing and even having some of our support team come in next month and answer questions about some of the things you can do if you're having trouble with sync. So lots of great things coming up in February. But for now, let's go ahead and transition back to today and talk about some practical tips to prepare your photos for stunning prints. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about simple edits that can make your photos look great. We're going to look at file resolution and how to check and adjust that if necessary. And then a few of the settings you're going to want to look at when you're exporting your images to print. So this is going to give you a general overview of these three things and hopefully give you a better idea of what to do when you're ready to print some images. You want those tangible things to hold on to because prints are not just, papers that we have lying around. These are the frame things we put on our walls or on our bookshelves or look through in our photo albums. And they're those very tangible reminders of our memories. It's a great grounding experience to have those photos. And I do highly recommend that you print some of your favorites because that's the stuff that's going to be passed down to next generations. Of course, we want our hard drives and our computers and all of this digital work we've done to be passed down, but those prints are awfully important. So let's go ahead and talk about the first tip, making simple edits that make your photos pop in prints. So some of the things you want to look for when you're getting ready to print is brightness and contrast. So when you're printing images, prints often appear darker than when they do on the screen. A lot of times our monitors are really bright. Some are brighter than others, but it's typically giving us a nice experience. Things look great on the screen, but when we get those prints back, they look really dark and kind of dull. And that's because our monitors are typically backlit. We have light shining back through those pictures, and it gives us kind of a false impression of what that print's going to look like. So when you're getting ready to print, you might want to brighten it up a little bit, and that's going to give you a better result. You also want to think about sharpening. So depending on what format you're taking your photos in, if they're coming straight out of your camera and they're a JPEG or an HEIC or something like that, your camera is probably applying some level of sharpening for you. But if you're shooting in a raw format, those are typically not sharpened. And what sharpening is it actually creates a little tiny bit of contrast around the areas of darks and lights in your pictures. So if the camera is not applying any of that, you'll need to apply a little bit of that in your post-processing. You'll also want to take a look at color and make sure your colors look awesome and like what you remember. Or maybe you make some creative choices and make your colors look a little bit less true to life. That's personal choice there. But you want to look at your white balance. That's the color and the tint of the light. So sometimes things are a little bit more blue or a little bit more yellow. You want to make sure that's nice and balanced. You also may want to make sure that your other colors in the image, that they pop, but they don't go, out of control. And, you want your picture to tell a story. You don't want the first thing that person sees in your picture to be the colors. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of editing. And let me just go through a couple more slides and then we're going to jump into a sample photo. So if you're doing some editing, there's a lot of stuff you can do in Mylio Photos, which we'll talk about in a minute. But there are some times that you might need to pop into an external editor. And that's when you need to do AI edits. So maybe you want to take it into a program that just automatically makes things look awesome. There's some really great tools out there. If you have distractions in a photo that need to be cloned or erased out, Mylio doesn't have cloning and erasing tools. Mylio has tools that help you edit the pixels that are there, but it's not going to move or replace any of the existing pixels. So that's something to keep in mind. And then if you want to get really creative, of course, you're probably going to want to branch out to an app that really suits what you're trying to do. A few of the apps that I love, Radiant Photo is an amazing AI photo editor. Luminar Neo is a very fully featured, easy to use, easy to learn application that has some problem solving tools like denoise and sharpening. It also has erase tools, things like that, and lots of other creative tools. If you're wanting to go and learn a little bit more, Adobe Camera Raw and Photoshop are amazing, but the learning curve is a little bit steeper, but it's a very, very powerful tool. So with the edits, you also want to consider cropping. So the reasons that I like to suggest cropping a photo, the first and foremost is to improve the composition. So a lot of times we take the picture, we're looking at either the back of our phones or through the viewfinder of a camera, and we might miss some of the things that are happening at the edges, or maybe we're holding the camera a little bit crooked. Cropping can help us with that. Also, if you want to make sure that you're cropping to a standard print size most of the time if you're planning to print. If you're printing on your home printer, you have options. You can maybe use a bigger size of paper and print a custom size. But if you're sending things out to a print lab, and especially if you're budget conscious, choosing a standard print size is going to be more affordable and easier to find than doing something that's custom. A lot of print labs will do custom sizes, but you do pay for the privilege. So some of those standard sizes that you're probably going to come across are going to be a 1:1 or a square. 2:3 is the aspect ratio for a 4:6, an 8:10, 16:20. All of those that you have, these are all standard sizes that you're going to come across. Actually, the 2:3 isn't the 8:10 and 16:20. That's the 4:5. I misspoke. 2:3 is also going to be your 12:18, 8:12, 12:18, I believe 18:24. And those are going to be some of the other standard sizes you're going to see. So you want to keep that in mind as you're doing this. So let's jump into Mylio Photos and do a quick edit. I've got an image here up on the screen. I edited this just here in Mylio Photos. And if you're not sure where the editing tools are, I'm going to go ahead and close up the sidebar here. What you're going to want to do here is you can either open up the info tab and click on edit, or there's a shortcut here just to the edit tools, and that pops you open in edit. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you here the before, and then there's my after. And you can see that I cropped the image and I made some stylistic changes here to make sure it fit my vision of what the scene was. So this was captured in Pismo Beach, California. It was fairly early in the morning. It was very, very cold outside, so that's why I kept that really cool blue feeling, but I wanted the warmth here on these pilings. Let me go ahead and walk you through how I did it, because this is actually a very quick and easy edit. I'm going to go ahead and reset this, and this is the beauty of editing in Mylio Photos. These changes are all non-destructive, meaning they're stored in the XMP file. They don't actually affect your original image, and you can reset it back to the original file at any time. Now, my personal workflow when I'm editing is I typically like to start with my crop first, because that gives me a better way to visualize what the final outcome of the image is going to look like. As I look at this image, I can tell that the horizon's a little bit crooked. And when you're straightening an image, you want to find something in there that you know is straight. In the case of this, I don't really want to reference off of the pier pilings, because pier pilings are often not perfectly straight. You want to go ahead and reference off of the horizon in this particular image. As far as my subject matter and what I want to focus in on, I think this area down here, these little remaining pilings from, old construction on the pier, and then the new ones, I think that area right there is kind of the most interesting. A lot of what's happening over here, not too interesting. And then there's some dark areas over here with hardly any detail. I don't think those are really adding anything to the frame. So let's go ahead and fix this. So I'm going to click on the crop tool. And the first thing I want to do is straighten out that horizon. So I'm going to use the little slider here at the bottom, and I want to reference off of that horizon line. So what I'm going to do is just slightly rotate this until I get that horizon line correct. And that looks pretty good. The next thing I want to do is choose an aspect ratio, and I want to stick to a standard size because that's going to be easier for me to go ahead and print. Down here at the bottom, you'll see it says aspect free. And if I start grabbing these handles and dragging them in, it's not going to keep any set aspect ratio. So what I want to do is click on this and choose a different option here. For this particular image, I think square is going to look really good just based on the shape of the subject. So I'm going to go ahead and choose square, which is a 1:1 aspect ratio. I can then drag this square around and start positioning it where I want. Now, looking at what else is here in the image, I think there's a little bit too much here on the right. And I'm going to go ahead and just pull down from the top and get rid of some of this here. I think that's looking pretty good. I might even pull in from the bottom here a little bit more. And I think that looks good. Let's go ahead and hit return on the keyboard. And that's going to go ahead and give us our final cropped image. One thing I'm noticing here in the crop that I made is there's this little light spot here on the right. When you have something really bright at the very edge of your photo, it pulls your eye right out of the frame. And that's not really a great composition. So I want to go ahead and correct that. We're going to pull this in a little bit tighter. And we're going to go here to the crop again. And I'm just going to pull this in a little bit closer, get rid of that little light spot there. Take a look here at the other details that I have going on. Make sure stuff is looking decent. And I think that's pretty good. So I'm going to hit return on the keyboard. And that's better. There's still a little bit of a light area here. We can get very detailed and start trying to correct some of those things. And there's a little bit of a light edge here. Let's do one more little correction. And I'm just going to pull that in from the top, maybe right about there. All right, that's better. So you can see how it gets really detailed, really easy as you're cropping and just refining that composition. But overall, I think this is a little bit more focused. The initial shot was a little too busy. This focuses in on this most interesting piece right here in the middle. From here, let's go ahead and do a little bit of correction. In Mylio Photos, we have some presets. The auto color and auto tone can be particularly helpful. Let's go ahead and see what those do. Just gave it a little bit of extra contrast. And then auto tone, I think that gave it a nice little pop too. So just to see where we've come so far, there's our before and after. And then we can go ahead and start making some other adjustments. This was taken very early in the morning on a winter morning. It was cold. If I wanted to, I could pull in a little bit more of that early morning light by just pulling the temperature slider to the right. You'll notice as I do that, it starts to feel a little bit too green. And that's where the tint slider comes in, and we can pull the tint over to the right to kind of compensate for some of that green that was coming through. You want to be gentle with this. You don't want to pull it too far. But that gives you some ideas of how you can manipulate the white balance to get that right color. Now, you can also control color down here in the color section. You have vibrance and saturation. I typically like to use vibrance because it's a lighter touch. It targets the less saturated areas of the image, where saturation is going to target every pixel. So we can go ahead and just nudge our vibrance up here to the right a little bit. And that, I think, is looking really nice. In doing that, though, I feel like it made it still a little too yellow, so we can go back up here to the top and we can back off a little bit on that temperature. Perfect. Now, in looking at this image, you'll notice that we have a lot of areas that look to be pure black and pure white. If you've never used it before, you can click the J key on the keyboard, and what this does is it pulls up your clipping warnings. And you might actually find yourself in this mode accidentally, and you see these overlays, and it can be kind of terrifying going, what happened to my pictures? Basically, what Mylio is showing you here is you've lost detail in the shadows and the highlights of your photo. You can always click the J key to go back to your normal view, but it can be a helpful creative tool to see what's going on. So in this instance, I want to adjust the tone to bring back as much of this detail as possible. I'm going to start with the highlights and pull that to the left, and you can see I brought back just enough detail here in my sky to where that's no longer clipping. I can also do the same thing here with my shadows, pull that up to the right, and you can see that's starting to give me a little bit more detail in these darkest areas. Now, if it doesn't take it far enough for you, you can always use the black slider, and that's going to give you even more detail. You can always pull the exposure up here, and that's going to brighten up some of those areas again. And then again, you can pull those highlights back to get that back to where you need it. So it's kind of a balancing act as you go through and do that. I'm going to click that J key again, and that just brought in a little bit more detail into the image. Now, one thing to notice when you start messing with your shadows and your highlights is an image can start to look a little bit flat because you're losing contrast. You're taking all the bright areas and bringing them down towards the middle, and you're taking all those dark areas and bringing them back to the middle, which makes an image look flat and boring. So at that point, you want to think about adding back in some contrast. You can use this contrast slider, but that's a bit heavy-handed because, again, it targets the entire range of pixels in the image. Instead, I like to use clarity, which targets more that middle section of the tones. If you're looking at the histogram, that's going to be kind of this middle section here. And if you pull that to the right, it's just going to add some depth, the appearance of detail, and that very necessary mid-tone clarity contrast that makes the image look that much better. Let's take a look here at our before and after. It's looking pretty good. The last thing I want to do here is I do want to add a subtle vignette that's going to darken the edges a little bit. And again, keep us towards the center of this picture. It just keeps the eye from wandering out of the frame. So I'm going to go ahead and take my vignette slider, pull that down to the left. And I like to pull it all the way down to -100 just to start, because that shows me where the vignette is. I can then take my feather, which is the blend, widen that out, and I think that's looking better. And if you need to, you can choose the center. So you can click choose subject and then choose that center point. And from there, I take the amount and I just back that off to where I think it needs to be. And somewhere usually between 40 and 60, depending on the image, is a sweet spot. It just is a very subtle darkening of the edges. You don't want people to notice the vignette, but it just is a composition tool that you can use. And all of these little changes take you from what is just a snapshot under the pier to something that's a little bit more artistic and will make a much better print. So let's go ahead and jump back over to the presentation. Before I go any further, are there any questions, Lori? Awesome. All right. So tip number 2 is checking the photo resolution. And this involves making sure that you have enough pixels to print. So what is resolution? This is something that's measured in DPI. You're going to see that term DPI, that abbreviation. It stands for dots per inch. That's the number of pixels you have to work with. And the higher the resolution, the better your print quality. So the recommended resolutions for most print labs, 300 DPI is going to give you the best for professional prints. You can get a very good quality for your everyday prints, stuff that you're going to put in your photo album or maybe in a frame on the shelf. 240 is very good. And if you're printing something very large, you can even go as low as 150. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. But let's go ahead and see what some of these standards look like in real life. So common print sizes and resolutions. You can see here in the screenshot on the right, I have an image that is 2041 by 2046 or 2060, sorry. And based on that number, I could print this at 300 DPI at a very high quality at an 8 by 10. If I start going up to an 11 by 14 or 16 by 20, I start bringing that quality down. It may still be a very acceptable print, but the quality is going to decrease the larger you get. So that's something to keep in mind as you go ahead and do this. Now, let me jump over here into Mylio for a second and show you what this looks like here with this image that we just did, because we did crop the image. We took away pixels, and that is going to impact how large we can print. So I'm going to switch over here to the info panel. And then over here on the left, you can see my original pixels were over 6,000 pixels on the long edge. But when I cropped it, it brought us down to 3886 or 3486 by 3486. So that's a notable decrease. However, that's still a really good size. So we have, over 3,400 pixels on both edges. That's going to allow us to print somewhere in, the 11 by 11 size, 12 by 12. We're still going to get a very good print quality. Now, what happens if you need to have more pixels? There's a couple of things to consider. You want to have 300 DPI, but it's not absolutely required. 240 is also very good. You can even go a little bit lower, and your naked eye is not going to be able to necessarily see the difference. You also want to consider how you're going to be viewing the photo. When you're looking at something like a 4:6, you're probably going to be here, 12 to 18 inches from your face. When you're looking at something that's a 20:30 or a 40:60, a massive wall print, you're probably not going to be looking at it 12 inches away, because if you are, you're only seeing a little portion of it. You want to step back 5 or 6 feet and take in the whole image. When you do that, that actually lowers the necessary amount of pixels. It gives you the option to have that lower DPI for those very large prints, because if you're standing back and looking at the image as a whole, back there, it's going to look great. Now, if you go up and you're looking at it with a microscope, of course, you're going to see that those pixels are not as good. So that's something to consider. You don't have to have 300, but it is nice to have when you can. If you really need more pixels, you can use software to upscale those images. And Topaz Photo AI is my absolute favorite for this. And I'm going to go ahead and jump over into Topaz Photo AI here for a second and show you this image. This is one that I scanned. It's an older image. You can see it's a bit grainy. It's actually my mom as a little girl. It's super cute, right? And what I did here in Topaz Photo AI was I did an upscale. If I click on that, you can see I did a 2x. So I took it from a little over 2,000 pixels on each edge to 4,000. So I'm doubling the size of this image, meaning I can print this quite large. I also did their AI face recovery, and I did a little bit of a lighting adjustment here. And so this is what I came up with. Let me go ahead and click off of the adjust faces here. So that pulled that X off of there. And you can see how much clearer that image is. And I doubled the resolution. So this is an amazing tool. You don't always have to do this, but if you're starting with something that's very small, or maybe you took a cell phone picture off of an older phone, you don't have many pixels to work with, and you cropped it, you might need to take it into a third-party tool like Topaz Photo AI. Luminar Neo also has an upscaling capability. On1 has one, and they're all very good. This is just the one that I happen to use the most and I get the best results with. So I do encourage you to check it out if you need that particular functionality, and it can make a huge difference. So let me jump back over here into Mylio for a second, and I'm going to go ahead and click back. And here's that original image. It was only 2042 by 2120. I'm not going to be able to print nearly as much with that as I am with this edited version that brings me up over 4,084. So keep that in mind. There are tools that can help you if the resolution of your pictures isn't quite good enough. And it can just, make a really big world of difference. All right. The last step here is going to be exporting your photos with the best settings for printing. So what we're going to talk about now applies to both printing from your home printer and sending off to a print lab. You want to make sure that you have the right settings. You want to get a high quality print, something that looks good no matter what you're using. Now, Mylio Photos does have an integration with Printique. That is the easiest way to get your prints made. And it's very kind of low maintenance. You don't have to worry too much about settings because Mylio takes care of that for you. So what I could do here is from Mylio, let's grab this image that I edited, and let's say I want to send this to Printique. All you have to do is click on the share menu, choose post, click on Printique, log in if you haven't used this before, or create a new account, and you can choose the gallery it goes to and change the file name if you need. Confirm that this is your image or you have permission to publish it, and that Printique can only ship to the USA and Canada. Click post, and that's going to send it directly to the Printique website. You don't have to worry about exporting. You don't have to worry about settings. And then you can go ahead and create your prints, your wall art, photo books, whatever you want to do. Very, very simple. If you're wanting to send to a different photo lab, or you're wanting to print on your home printer, printing on your home printer, you can do that straight here from Mylio if you're using just a standard home printer like your multifunction machine that you might have. If you click on print here, you have the option to do a paper size, so you can choose whatever paper size your printer is capable of. Mylio has the option here to go up to, I believe, an 8 by 10. If you want to print something larger and you have a larger format printer, I do recommend using either the software that came with your printer to print, or I personally use Photoshop to print. It's up to you. You can use either one, but that's what I usually do to accomplish that. If I'm sending things to a different lab, what I would do is export. You're going to put things onto, let's say, a temporary folder on your desktop, and then you're going to upload those files to whatever print lab you want to use. So if I choose export, then I'm here. I can go ahead and choose a preset. We have 2 different printing presets here. And if you're sending to a professional print lab and you need super high quality stuff, go ahead and choose printing high quality. If all you're needing to do is get, 4x6s for your photo album, you can use this printing standard quality. Let's go ahead and go over what these are. The high quality option gives you a TIFF file. Now, not all print labs will accept a TIFF. Usually the ones that cater to higher end print customers like those professional photographers, they will accept a TIFF file. Some of the more consumer friendly ones, they'll want a JPEG. It's going to give you your original dimensions, so the full quality file as it's available, your maximum quality, color space. Most print labs use sRGB, 16-bit bit depth, and that's only going to be for your TIFF files. If you switch this to JPEG, that's not an option. It's up to you what metadata you want to include. When you're setting it for print, the metadata isn't as important. And it's up to you, again, if you want to include your watermark. Typically when I'm printing, I do not. If I want to put a mark onto my printed photos, I will actually hand sign it. If we go ahead and switch this here to the standard quality, again, this is going to be great for when you want to just print a bunch of 4x6s or smaller files. Again, you're going to do your original. You're going to do a high quality. In this case, it's suggesting an Adobe RGB. I probably would switch this to an sRGB. And again, your metadata and watermark are personal choice. So that's it. Once you do that, you can go ahead and click export. It's going to have you choose a location on your hard drive to put those files. I keep a temporary exports folder here on my desktop. I can say new folder, and I can say for print and choose create. And that's going to go ahead and I click save. And it's going to take those settings that I just entered, take that file, export it, and then I can upload that file to whatever print lab I want to use. So from there, I think that's pretty much all that I wanted to cover today. The things that I would love to have you guys take away from this is to make sure you don't just take your pictures straight from the camera, sending them to the print lab. Take a little bit of time to make sure that you have a good crop, that your horizons are straight, and that the subject in your image is really what you're focusing on. There's a lot of things you can do just with cropping to focus in on your composition. Make sure the color looks good. Make sure you have details as much as possible in your shadows and your highlights. If needed, brighten it up a little bit. All those things are very easy to do within Mylio Photos, or you can always get creative in other software. You want to make sure you have enough pixels to print with, so ensure that you have the proper resolution for that print size. And then choosing those export settings. If you follow these 3 steps, these 3 tips, you're going to walk away with great prints you're going to be very happy with. Things that you can display in your home, that you can hand down to the next generation, tangible reminders of your memories that are just absolutely powerful and wonderful. I just want to do a quick reminder that we have open Q&A for you guys on Tuesday, Thursday next week, 11:30 a.m. Pacific. Hopefully you can join me and jump in. Coffee break next week, we'll be talking about link, copy, or move, and how to understand the different import options in Mylio Photos, when to choose the right one. So with that, again, have a happy Friday, enjoy your weekends, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.